Let us keep going. As we go ahead and start thinking about like some stuff this afternoon, I want to go ahead and answer any questions people may have. There's just always kind of lots of little things as you start trying to implement and apply either the visibility things or the roof things or just sort of little modeling things. People are having lots of little problems, so let's kind of see if there's any sort of problems that we can generalize to a lot of different people.
Not so much a problem. That's not so much a problem. I'm just wondering how do you get the grass to show up on the site?
Ah, that's a very good question. Let's even get to talk about that. That's a good one. We'll just do a little bit of like random questions for now. So, do you have a new file that just has no grass, or do you have grass and it just doesn't look like grass?
Yeah, it just looks like bare earth. It's brown.
Ah, no worries. That's easy. Let's go ahead and fix this up. So, as you go through and you try and create the site or something like that, I think, I don't remember if I put it as a site or if I put it as a floor for yours. I'll do two that are the same way. Sometimes if I have a really flat site, I'll just make it a floor, which sounds really awful, but it'll work. Okay. And of that floor, I can say even, let's duplicate it. I'll just call it like site. And you give it a material. So it has a structure. The structure is going to be, and you can choose. You have all these different sort of site materials in here. Let me see if I can find them in there. Stone, tile. Let's see, Autodesk materials. Let's try those. I used to know where they are all located. And they're miscellaneous. Okay, there's earth. So that's where the bare earth came from in terms of that. Let's see if I can find the grass. Where would that be hiding? That's always flooring, fabric. Yeah, I don't think it has miscellaneous, plastic, stone, tile, wood. That doesn't sound very good. Not under favorites. Just have grass as a site in the material. I have glass. Fabric, flooring. I'm not going to think of it that way. Flat, miscellaneous. Try that one. There it is. Okay. So under the AEC materials, under miscellaneous, this is something that changed in 2013, so I always have trouble finding things. There's grass right there. So I can add that in there. So here is, oh, let's find grass. There it is. So you can choose that. Say OK. So you just make a material called like grass, and then when you do that, and you show that in 3D, and I shade it, hopefully it'll look green. Now it's still looking pretty barren in terms of what's going on. Let me see if it's even realistic. Realistic, it's okay. Okay, let's talk about what's going on here. If it shades funny, if it shades and doesn't look like green, it's shading and looking like sort of a gray material, here's what's going on. If we come back in and take a look at that material for grass, and I can actually look at that material a number of ways. Let me come over and just look at it in the materials dialog. That'll sort of shortcut us a little bit. I'll say grass, and we'll take a look at it. There's this whole question of really, it has a shaded appearance, and it also has a photographic appearance. So the graphics are the shading. So here's where you're seeing it's just currently going to a sort of a default gray color right now. So if I want to go ahead and make that a little bit of a green color, I can choose a green. And if I want to give it a pattern, for example, I want it to have a little bit of stipple or somehow look like it has a little bit of texture to it, I can choose like a sand pattern or something like that. That might help. So I'll say done, say OK. And then if I go back to shaded, hopefully, okay, it's green. Now, a quickie way, probably the better way to do that, just so you know about it, because you're going to run into it at some point again, when we say manage and we choose the grass and we say edit it, there's a really cool little thing right over here which says use the render appearance. And using the render appearance does this. It takes the photograph and it sort of says, what is the average color shade in the photograph? And just maps that automatically for you. So if it's this deep dark green and I choose that, okay, it'll pull it to a deep dark green for you automatically. So that's actually kind of a nice thing to do. That way if you change the photographic appearance, okay, it'll really quickly change it in the shaded view too. Okay, so you have those two different things. So that's good. Oh, let me show you the one other way to create a site, just because it's sort of good stuff. If all the world were flat, that's pretty boring. You'd probably fall off the edge. But if we wanted to go ahead and have some sort of profiles and contours and stuff like that, and a lot of your sites do, you have some sort of hills and valleys and things you want to build on, you can also go ahead and model those things too. And where those live in the world of Revit is actually under massing and site. They have something called a topo surface. And here's how a topo surface works. The topo surface can be generated in a couple of different ways. It really is just a lot of earth. Okay? And you specify the height, the elevations of the different points on the earth, and it'll go through and do the contours based on that. So if, for example, I want to create a topo surface, you can go through and sort of say, I'm going to put some points down that have some elevations. So I can put down a couple points that are at 0, 0. But then if I want to put down a little bit of a hillside, I can say, oh, how about at 5 feet back here, or over there, or maybe at 7 feet here and here. You can start creating a little bit of contour line for you. And the nice thing about that is it's an accurate 3D representation. So you have like a nice little hillside to build upon. Okay. This also can have a material like grass. By default, I think it's just going towards earth. If we go through and change that, let me finish that. I'll change the material. I'll let that be grass also. Okay, now it's like green. So 2 different ways of doing that. What you're going to find, and one thing we can do, remember this, you won't need it at first with the rings assignments, but as you go further in, at some point you're going to decide that you're sitting on a really big hillside that exists somewhere in the world. And when it's time to do that, come on back and say, how do we do that? Because what we do is we go to Google Earth, we actually pull down the topographic data, at least the satellite-like data from Google Earth as a DWG file, and we can then generate a site out of that. So you never have to go ahead and kind of completely generate things. If you have surveyor data that someone's going to give you that's very accurate, we'll use that instead. But if you just need kind of the rough data about your site in Lake Tahoe on the hillside, okay, the satellite data is actually really good for giving you just the overall lay of the land. Okay, so there's a way to do that and generate that automatically for you. Beauty. Yes, what you got?
I know that there's probably a way to do this, but I get confused. When you make a section, and how do you keep that section or multiple sections, bring it back to the regular view after make those sections?
Okay, let's think about it. Do you have an example there, like on your screen?
No, but so if you cut the building in half and then you click to view the section, it seems like I'll get stuck there and I can't get.
Let us see how we do that. Let's go back out there. I think that's a good question. Let's say open recent. I'll just go to sort of where we were a little bit earlier with that basic building that we got volunteered. So here we are on the floor plan. If we cut a section through the building, so for example, I come through and I go to the view tab and I cut a section, maybe I'll cut a section this way. So there's my section. Okay, so the deal is when you want to go to the section, it shows up a couple different places. It shows up down here in the browser. So over here on the left-hand side, it's section 1, and we can give it a better name if we want to. But if we double-click on the little head, it'll take us over here. Okay, so far so good. Okay, and you want to get back to floor plan 1 or something like that? What you do is just actually choose it right back out of the browser over here. So,
well, no, I mean like when you do that in 3D. Yes, that's what I'm.
Oh, a 3D section.
Yeah.
Ah, now that's trickier. No, okay, let's talk about that. Here we are in 3D. Everything's looking kind of groovy on the outside of the building. If we want to go ahead and use that 3D sectioning thing, okay, here's what you got to do. What I should do is actually, as opposed to making my default 3D view match the section box, what I'll do is I'll right-click and I'll duplicate this. And I'll rename this to be, oh, what is it? 3D section box 1. Okay, so now I got the separate view. So over here, now this is the one, I can turn on the section box, and I've done it myself. Pardon me. Okay, we've been doing that a lot. Or I think what you might be referring to is there's that whole thing, I've cut a section and I can make it, the 3D view match that section. I can't seem to hit that, can I? Right there. Okay. If I want it to match the section, what I can do is I'll come up here and in the view cube, I can right click on that, say, orient this view cube so it matches a section. That's kind of how I do that quickly. But the deal is that section box is independent. So in this view, it'll be here. The plain old one's back over here. So the key to this thing is actually just to have several views, each that have their own section box. Because you're right, there's no easy way once you cut that section to kind of just get back to the whole. So it's really you start having two different views, one that's cut and one that isn't cut. That makes sense? Okay, so same sort of thing. Actually, there was that whole question I think yesterday about how do you scalp the building quickly. Another good way to scalp the building is, let's go ahead and duplicate this. Okay, and I'll say this is going to be 3D walls only. Okay, a really quick way to scalp the building, or even if we do a multi-story building to kind of have a specific layer, is to take this and say orient it to view and orient it to, say, the first floor plan. Because what will happen then is you'll use the view range from the first floor view to go ahead and really quickly set the section box for you. Okay, so that's just kind of a really quickie way of generating those views sometimes. So anything you have in a 2D view, you can go ahead and make it into a 3D view. I actually like that. I think it's a really good trick for going through and like making these. I like these kinds of floor plans. For some reason, I think people have an easier time understanding that than floor plan. Other questions? Yes, what you got?
I can't change the size of the tag. It's really small.
Oh, that's actually kind of a hard one. Tags are really, they're relative to the scale of the drawing. So,
Yeah.
what scale is your drawing? Half-inch, okay. So the tag is really small relative to the half-inch drawing. If you were going to go ahead and let's put the window tag. Oh no, and this is all really, it's because the text is trying to hold the right size. It's actually sort of a tricky thing, and it really gets to the way the tag is defined. So what we almost need are two different versions of the tag. A tag for half scale and a tag for like quarter scale. So what that would look like is, oh, let's go back to that framing plan. Do we have some tags there? We do. So I think the problem is, you got these tags, they're looking pretty good. If I switch down to half scale or something like that, they're looking pretty tiny. And that's what we're a little worried about. They're scaling about right, or appropriately to there, but let me edit this. What you may want to do is, if you want to have something that scales better or at a different way that way, is come back in here and really just change the definition here. I'm trying to think how these things do scale. Because I think they really are just considered to be an absolute size. So that's why when you change the scale, they're shrinking. So I think what you may want to do is, let me see if I can even do this. There's all sorts of tricks. Under Modify, let's see if I can do this. There actually is a scale tool. Let's see if I can make this work graphically or numerically. Let's say numerically. Just give it a scale of 2. That sounds good. Will it work? Will you not work? Not going to work. Oh, it did. Well, I didn't quite get it out there. Let's try that again. I'll say this. I'm going to say scale it up by a factor of 2. A numerical. What do I do? Oh, I think what I have to do is choose the center point of the rotation, or that's what it is. I wonder why I'm losing that one. That must be it. So I need to kind of do something and fix it up. Okay, but so you can scale it. Then what you would do is, if you want to have that as a different tag, I would say save it as a family, and you should really put it out in your library somewhere, someplace where you can get to it real easy. It's going to be called my 2 times the window tag. It's just a very big one. And I'll load that on in. So what I can do over here in my framing plan, I have that tag, but if I want to say, let's use the 2 times window tag, okay, you can get the bigger one in there.
I can modify.
Good modify?
Yeah, it's not the same.
No worries. It's always, yeah, all that stuff that's happening back in the tags, it's really just lines and stuff like that. So, you know, maybe something about a specific code tree, it's, you know, what's in the graph. Okay, so now that's the text. Can you get to the hexagons in the background? Yeah. Let's just try pulling that out or something like that. So what we're trying to do is just really resize it. Yeah. So your task is to take those 6 lines and kind of either scale them out or redraw your own 6 lines. Okay. Yeah. So another way, let me show you another way to do that, because I think it might also be along the lines of what you want. How about this? Let's see if we can do this. We'll switch the windows over there. Where's my super big whatever? Can't see it. More open views. There it is. Okay. I could just go ahead and take those out. Backspace them out. They are gone now. And somewhere in here, oh, I gotta always find it. It's under Create. Oh, is it a line or a symbol? I think it's a line. But basically I'm going to draw, and I can draw that I want to sort of say I want to have some sort of polygon, like a 6-sided polygon, and then just start pulling out. And I can create it that way too. So if scaling isn't right, you can go ahead and try and do something like that. But it's basically, you're just drafting at that point, and then whatever you draft is ultimately going to pull into the project, the lines. Okay? Yeah.
If you're doing the sheets,
Yes.
you change the fonts of the name.
That's a good question.
I mean, of the name of the pictures you've got on the sheet.
Sure, let's take a look at that. Okay, so we're looking at sheets. And in terms of the sheets, let me take a look at these sheets. This looks like it's kind of my funny little sheet, so let's kind of take that out. So, oh, for example, like this.
So like the pick ripple of the picture.
Oh, those.
So like that guy right there.
That's actually sort of interesting too. That is, you might guess, another family object. So let's see what it is. In terms of the family, let's see what it is. Okay, it's the viewport with the title line. Let's see what's going on here. Let me try editing the type. Show the title, the color, the pattern, that's okay. It has a title called view title. Okay, so far so good. I think we have to dig in one step further. There's sort of this whole thing of, there's a title that includes something called view title, so we have to go one step further. I'm going to go and see if I can find where that is. Let's see if I find titles. I'm not finding it there. Let's see if I can find it in annotations. I'm not finding it there. I'm going to keep on thinking about this. Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can edit this. We're here. This is really making me think, because there is a way. Basically, it is a primitive that we have to get to. So here's view title. That's okay. That's none. But I got to find where view title actually lives. I think it's there, but can I edit that? Try editing it there. Ah, there it is. Okay. Let me see if I can find it. This is so strange, because we're over here, we're looking around in the browser. You sort of have this issue. Can you edit the individual family member, or do you have to edit the family? I'm going to edit the family. So here's where that's defined, and here's the piece of text. So if you, for example, want to change the font of that, what's the label? The label is actually what we want to show. It's the view name. You could sort of put something else in there instead. But then, oh, how do we change the text itself? Edit type. There it is. Okay, so I can go ahead and make that Arial black and make it, oh, 1/4 inch tall or something like that.
Edit type.
Yeah, what I had to do is, let me go back on over there. Let's get back over to the other one. And you're asking good questions that are actually tough questions. Over here, way down in the project browser, you'll find something called View Title, and that's the one it's defined by. And don't click the instance. See if you can click the group. You can say Edit the family. And then it'll take you to the little editor, and you can start making the change. So same thing here. I might want to change the size of the number, or I might want to change different things. In this case, I actually sort of did a sloppy thing in that I just changed the piece of text called label, and it changed both those things. So what I might want to do is, as opposed to doing that, let me undo this. Take that, and I'll edit this type. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to call that the title label, so that I can make that bigger without actually making all the rest of the text big. Does that make sense? Okay, and you get something like that. And then if I load that back into my project, with any luck, if I go back here, there we go. That's looking a little bit better now.
Okay. Excellent.
Good stuff. But you're going to find all the stuff is customizable. And the cool thing is, when you start developing a nice library, you have your favorite styles. Like, I go through and I make my dimension lines light blue. I make these teal. I have all these funny little colors and stuff like that. Super. Save it as a template. You'll never have to go back and do that again. So start having your own little personal style. Even as you're starting working on projects as part of your group, you're going to find that people work together, and like you'll start having a project style where all your lines are red and you all use this typeface. And it gives you that nice little customization, and it makes your projects a little bit special. It's a little bit stuff that's coming out of the box. So you don't need to get there right away, but know that it's available to you. You really can control everything. Somehow everything is a part that's related to a part, which is related to something that you can edit as a family. And it all just sort of assembles out of all those little pieces. Okay, any more? Yes?
When I'm trying to put like my drawings into the sheets, like I have so much more than I need, like I have just a bunch of white. How do I get that up?
That's all cropping. So your big trick is, and let's kind of talk about cropping. Okay, so here we are. You always want to go through and, if crop is off, you'll get a lot of stuff, including the trees and stuff like that. If you want to turn on cropping, you kind of bring things in much closer. Now, let me kind of show you, did we do it in your class with the cropping and there was this question that came up about this. In terms of cropping does sort of funny things. The levels actually get to hang out outside the crop region. They're sort of considered okay. They have a special status. They get away with a lot of things that other things can't get away with. We have the ability, though, as you go through and put some other things in there. For example, I'll put some dimensions in here. To put a dimension in here, as long as it's inside the crop region, everything's happy. If I go through and I put that thing in out here, and I pull out, oops. Looks like it's still happy. I think it's because I changed something already. Every view has the option of really, as you're going through, whether you want to crop the annotations or not. By default, annotations stay on. If annotation cropping is turned off, right there, what are you doing? Oh, I think it's because it's actually right under that one. That's interesting. Let me try this again. It's destroying my example. That one should be good. That one doesn't. Okay. This is actually sort of a very funny hybrid case because the section markers get to violate it, levels get to violate it, so I have that dimension which is right on top of the section marker, so it got to violate it too. But if you ever get a message that looks like this, none of the created elements are visible, that is, has nothing to do with you created the valid dimension. It's just that it's falling outside of what's considered to be a valid range right now. And why this is happening to us now is just because of the cropping. Hey, good day. So you get your choice about how you do want to go through and do that. Okay, so yeah, let's do that. Next up, any other random questions? Yes. Let's talk about that. Dimensioning in witness lines is definitely one of the stranger things that you have to worry about. So let's go back over to the framing plan where I think I have some dimensions. We'll think about that. Okay, For witness lines, here are the big sort of options. If you've already placed some dimension lines and things are looking good, what you can do is choose that dimension line. If you choose the dimension line and you right-click on it, you get the choice that says Edit the Witness Lines. And edit witness lines is actually a little bit of a misnomer. It's really add and edit witness lines. So the only thing you can do with edit witness lines is add a new one. Okay. If you want to move one or you want to go through and take one out, okay, what you need to do is, again, we'll start by clicking on the dimension, but really, rather than just right-clicking on the dimension, we are going to right-click on the witness line itself, and there's a little blue dot right in the middle of it. Actually, I think if you click it, it'll rotate through some different places, like different sides of the window. What I usually do is right-click on it and say move it, and then I can sort of choose what I want to align it to. So again, just right-click, move the witness line, and pull it to whatever point you want to. Yes?
How to modify the style.
Oh, the style! No worries. Let's take a look at that. Oh, let's come over here and look at even linear dimensions have a set of type properties. So let's see what they are. If we go through and let's think about this, the dimension line extension, that's how far away it is staying away from the object. Let's try changing that. Let's say I want to make that a quarter instead or something like that. Nah, it didn't make much of a difference. Oh, actually, am I looking at the right thing? Let me make it a half. I'll see what it actually is. Still doesn't seem like one of those witness line gap to element. That's what I'm looking at there. I'm not sure the extension is. Let's try making that a quarter. Okay, that'll pull them back away a little bit. In terms of what's happening in terms of the, like the color is right there. So for these, in terms of the color of, let me think about this. I think that the color of the dimension line and the color of the witness line have to stay the same. Let me try that. Yeah, so now all my dimension lines are blue. What else do you want to change about it? I can change the color, I can change the hold off. The thickness? Let's see if we can change that or not. It's a good question. Witness line gap, dimension line snap difference, text width, unit format, other, equality text.
It's at the top there.
Is it?
It's got a line with it.
Oh, excellent. Let's see if that affects both or leader tick marks. This is interesting. Let's see if we can figure that out. So there's line weight there. I'm going to make it really fat. That'll make it easy to see. Actually, if I have not thin lines turned on. Let's try this again. Let's see if we can make any difference here. Line weight there. Oh, there's two of them. There's tick mark line weight. This is interesting. Okay, let's try this. See if we can figure out the pattern. Okay, that's the line weight overall. Tick mark line weight, I think that's just going to be the little like crosshatch. Yep. I'm not sure I can actually separate the witness line. It seems like the line weight of the witness line and the actual dimension line itself are the same. So that doesn't look like something I can change. Witness line extension, line length. Don't know. That goes into the mystery pile for now, in terms of how that works. It's good. I'm glad to hear that you really are thinking about it in all the detail in terms of doing this, because a lot of people just kind of leave the same standard stuff out of the box. So you'll find that if you go through and start customizing these things a little bit, you can really create a much nicer set of drawings. Like I actually like to go ahead and take the witness lines and sort of, I glue them back, but degrade them back a little bit or something like that, so that the architectural elements stand out more from the dimensions. You can really call attention to the right things. And if you don't want to just have a single type, for example, I have blue dimension lines here, even these things are a type. So you can go through and start editing them. They have just all sorts of, different, let's try what the fill dot is. Oh, that's interesting. That's a style where, as opposed to putting all the cross hatches, you put the little fill dots. I don't know. There's a lot of different styles in there, but you can really start having a very custom appearance to your drawings and start, messing around with it. Okay. Let us go ahead and change gears just a little bit. Let's go through and just kind of get you started down the path of how you actually go through and start thinking about bigger buildings. Because, hey, if everything was a little 500 square foot wood frame building, likely pretty boring, you need to start thinking about how it scales up to bigger buildings. And in fact, for your second assignment, you're going to be working on a much bigger building, something more on the scale of Y2E2. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about that. And to do that, what I'm going to do just to get started with is just start with a brand new architectural template and see how it goes. Actually, I should introduce you, someone who joined us. He's going to be helping out a little bit. There's Sriram, who's back here. He's actually going to be our TA to kind of keep on following us through with some different things. So if you have some questions and I'm not getting to it, raise your hand and Sriram will come and like go into back there. The TAs are starting to assemble. So he's going to be around helping out through this as well as with the 110 course and 210 kind of through fall quarters. So to be part of the community of people you can draw on to help out with this stuff. Okay, so if something's coming up, raise your hand and we'll get a little bit of help on this. Okay, so I want to think about starting to do some sort of multi-story building. As you think about doing multi-story buildings or bigger buildings, some things that you need to think about in advance just to get going. But before you start modeling something a little bit bigger, it really is very helpful to get your framework set up, to have the levels set up to what you want to be. Even if you're going to use grid lines to go ahead and help constrain or rotate columns or key walls in there, it's helpful to get some of that stuff laid out in advance because that framework will really help organize everything and keep everything much more just easy to manage as you keep on going. So let's talk about setting up your framework and how you can very quickly start to generate a building that has many different stories to it. Okay, so the issue of levels and stories is always handled from the elevations. So go to any of the elevations. It doesn't really matter which one, north, east, west, and south, all do the same thing. You'll find that there's some levels there right now. There's level 1 and level 2. And level 1 and level 2 are pretty happy. They're currently sitting at about 10 feet floor to floor. If you start thinking about a building that may be a little bit skinny, a lot of buildings, for example, this building has a much higher floor-to-floor height. It's probably a little, I guess it's probably about 12 feet till you get to that ceiling itself. And then there's probably about another 2 or 3 feet between us and the floor above. It's really, there's a lot of space in there for ductwork, for structure, all that interstitial stuff that we need to put in there. So 10 feet is probably a little bit shy for most commercial buildings. If you want to raise that up a little bit, I'll just kind of take that level 2, I'll just change that right there to be, I'll say 14 feet. That's as good as any. Okay, but again, change the levels in the floor-to-floor height here. That way, if later on you find out for budget reasons we either have to shrink or do something different, or because of our mechanical needs we need to change the floor-to-floor heights, it'll be easy for us to change them later. Okay, level 1 and level 2 are going to be great for a very simple building, but if I need a 3, a 4, a 5, and 6, you'd like to add some more levels. And here's the way to do it. There's a couple different ways. We could go ahead and on the Architecture tab, way over on the right-hand side, you'll find under the Datum tools, there's something called just the Level tool. And if you choose the Level tool, we can go ahead and just start drawing. We can drag from left to right and draw that out. And that's an okay way to do that. If I just have to kind of really quickly add a level, sometimes I'll just draw them in there. But I want to show you another way, which I think is even more powerful, especially on a multi-story building. And that's not just to draw them, but to actually use offsetting to create them. Because offsetting is a really great thing. It says not only copy something, but also give it a set distance away. So it's really easy to kind of create a bunch of things that are the same relative distance from each other. So here's how you would use it. I'm going to go to the Modify. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to grab that leveling tool. And rather than using the drawing mode here, I'm going to choose this one right next door, which says Pick Lines. Because Pick Lines will let us sort of pick an existing line and use it as a reference. Now, once we go ahead and say pick lines, we need to sort of enter some sort of offset here, what the distance is that it wants to be. Offset as we create the new instances. So, for example, if I put 14 in here, to kind of keep on having levels that are 14 apart from each other, I can type 14. And then what I can do is hover right over the drawing area, and let's watch this. If you come on down and you get right over an object, it'll start suggesting where it'll put the next one. Now notice it's currently sort of suggesting above the line. The reason is you see that See that my cursor's just right above the line. I'm just barely above it. So that's going to say put it on the north side. If I was pushing just a little bit below, not sure if you can see, it's putting it right on top of level 1 right now. It's going below. So be careful as you place it. You got to be just a hair over one side or the other. So I can say, let's go ahead and put that level 3 in there. I'll offset again and make a level 4. Offset again and make a level 5. And it's sort of a really quick way to do it. So you can, again, draw those independently and adjust all the heights. But all the oscillate is really quick easy to do it that way. So set up a little bit of framework for yourself. Okay, let me go back to level 1 then, or actually let's make sure you get that done. So go ahead and see if you can get a couple different levels for yourself. Again, the offset tool will help you, and see if you get like, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Where are we now? We got that. I think yours is just being very slow. I know this machine can be very slow because it's looking like it's trying to create one, but it's just sitting there. No worries. Go ahead and modify again. Try that again. I'm not sure what we're doing. Like, try it again. We'll say, do that. We'll put a distance in. Okay, now hover over this one. There you go. There it is. Put the cursors off on this machine. Something about where you think you're pointing and where it really is pointing. Yes?
I do it. Just change the names and the logos. So we're going to do it. This is level 1 and level 2. And that's level 3. Oh, that's not it. It's like 3, 2, 4.
Oh, no. What happened there is as you're doing it, if you happen to accidentally sort of be a little bit low, level 3 went right on top of level 1.
So it got inserted in.
Yeah. So you had 2 on top of each other, and what it does is every time you create one, it keeps on incrementing. So it goes 2, 3, 4. So watch out for that. If you happen to get one that's a little bit out of order, okay, and you take it out, that'll be okay. But the auto numbering may be a little bit off. That's okay. If your numbering's a little bit off, you can always go through and change things. For example, for level 4 here, if I want to change its name, if that really needs to be level 5 or it needs to be level 3B or whatever it is, you can always change the name of a level. Yeah, so don't worry if your levels came in and you're a little bit out of order in terms of the numbers, it'll still catch up with itself. Yes, no? Oh, no worries. What it is it's when you have the level tool open and then we have to use that little, it looks like picking a green line. It's an arrow that's pointing at a little green line. Yes, and now we have the offset here. Okay, so you can type in the distance. And then once you put it in the distance, there you go. They cover right above it. Right there. Yes, exactly. And then do another one above it. Okay, now you got it. Beautiful. Okay, if you've got some levels, we are ready to roll. So, as we go through and create our building, an important thing to think about is as you go through and work on a building that's a bigger size, very often what happens is the floors are pretty similar from level to level, and you can actually take advantage of that to actually model things on one floor and then copy and paste them up for the floors. That's really a very good way to do a lot of buildings because it actually mirrors a lot of the construction process. If you think about how we do buildings, for a lot of conventional buildings, not so much new buildings that are tilting and doing all sorts of interesting structural gymnastics, but for buildings that sort of go straight up, pretty much it is, we do one floor, we repeat the operation above, and we just kind of keep on stacking up the building that way. So, you know, you can model things in a very similar way, and if that's the way it's going to be built, that'll be appropriate. So here's what you got to do. I'm going to come over to level 1 just as a starting point, and I'm going to start just modeling a little bit of building. And this is going to be, again, not all that precise about what's going on. It's really just an example to get us going, but it'll sort of get us thinking in the right direction. I'm going to go choose some walls and just start generating a little bit of a shape of a building. I'm going to use sort of exterior brick on metal stud. And actually, I should be very careful about this. as I place the walls. I'm racing right off and I'm not doing what I should say you should do. Don't leave them unconnected 20. Go ahead and make it go from level 1 to level 2. Okay, be precise about that, because if we're going to keep on copying and pasting things up, we want to make sure that the constraint is just from level to level, so when it pastes up to the next level, it's going to keep on honoring that constraint. So I'll choose level 2 at the top. I'll say let's go ahead and create our building here. This isn't a very big building. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. There's nothing special about what's going on here. Let me just go ahead and make it fine so I can see it. I'll shade it. I have just so far created some brick walls. Nothing very different at all from what you've been doing for the past couple days. Now, inside this building, let's go ahead and kind of make some hallways, divided up a little bit in terms of how we want to sort of organize the building. So I will go through and choose the wall tool again. What do we want to do here? Let's go down and get some of these interior partition walls. Again, going up to level 2. And I can start thinking about, a hallway that comes down like this. Maybe there's something that comes like this. Not a very good design, but it'll work. Then I can start subdividing things up a little bit too. When it comes time to put doors and windows on this thing, again, it's good to sort of do that at the one of the levels first and use whatever method you want to. So for example, when I put some windows in this thing, I can start just placing windows independently, kind of like we started doing. Or even better, if you want to start arraying things, you might array things out. I'll choose that window. I'll say from here to here. Oh, let's put 5 of them in there. Or another very kind of cool thing to do, if you go ahead and take a look at Y2E2, it has kind of a funny pattern to it. It's not that all the windows are evenly spaced out like this. What happens is we tend to have pairs and triplets of windows, things like that. So you can go ahead and put in windows in more of a pattern that looks like this. Let me say, I'll put in one here. I can either copy it or just put a second one in there. But if I go through and make a little pair of windows like that, I can array that. So as opposed to arraying a single element, let me go ahead and say that I want to make an array from here to here. And again, I'll put in like 4 of those, something like that. I have little pairs of windows now. So just really use whatever scheme makes the most sense to you in terms of how you're going to organize the outside of the building. But pretty quickly, you can come up with an overall shell of building. It's all looking good in terms of what's going on. Now, as you keep going, you might want to put some interior walls in here. This might have something to do with whether this is a building where you're going to do tenant improvements separately or whether you're actually specifying all these things. I'll go ahead and put some of the interior office spaces in here. That's not looking too bad. Maybe I'll put some over here too and even put a couple doors in. But the idea is we're just starting to create a single floor, and from that single floor we can start generating some other things. Maybe I'll put some doors in here too. But go ahead and get one floor set up as best you can, and then we'll sort of operate on that from there. So let me fix up some of these doors. I'll flip that one. Oops, wrong way. Should need to flip that one. Let's watch out for this. There we go. Random thing about doors. One of the things that really bugs people in development. Whenever you see doors that do this, this kills you. Doors where you open into the wall, something like that. Yeah, it's just a mistake. You always go ahead, and if you're placing doors, Have them swing back to the wall so you're opening into the room or something like that. That's always my kind of general rule for doing stuff like that, but whatever, there's a lot of ways to do this. Okay, so I got some doors in there. I can even go through and start putting fixtures and furniture, whatever I want to keep putting in here, but I'm just basically populating this first floor. And once you've populated that first floor, you'll say, whew, that's pretty good. Let's take a look at it, and that's what it looks like so far. Okay, go ahead, breathe a big sigh of relief. We got one floor down. You might also want to go ahead and put the floor underneath this thing. That would actually be good. If we're going to go ahead and start creating a multi-story building, you might as well pick up the floor as part of the operation. So I will go through and back on that first floor plan, say floor. For the floor, let's go ahead and we'll extend into the core. And just pick up the outside edges. There we go. I know we'll need some floor openings in a little while, but we'll get to that. That's going to be okay. We'll finish that up. Okay, now I've been racing through that incredibly fast. In case you haven't been racing through that so fast, let me go ahead and save this as, just so you can have that same model to work with. I'll put it out there. I'll put it multi-story, single floor, Group B. So if you want to just pick that up, that's okay too. Okay, so you don't have to keep on doing that over and over again. So we got a basic one floor building. We're looking pretty good. And again, we can keep on adding things to this. It's really whatever you want to copy at lower level. So the deal is, when it's time to start actually making a multi-story building, okay, you could go and come up to level 2. And on level 2, you can actually see through to level 1. And I could go through and start drawing walls, draw all these interior walls, start putting all those doors in again and trying to customize the second floor. Then I can go up to level 3 and start customizing that. But you're going to find out that it's a lot of work. And if you think about how your building is organized, you always got to think, is it easier to start from nothing and build up? Or is it easier to start with sort of a clone of something and then subtract back out? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to work out that it's going to be easier to clone than start just subtracting differences, as opposed to having to recreate from scratch. Because one nice thing about cloning and recreating, as opposed to recreating from scratch, is if I clone and copy this up, oh, the second floor will be aligned with the first floor. Everything's going to start out in pretty good alignment. We can always make changes, but it's nice to have everything line up pretty much where it's going to be, or typically will be in a building. So I'm going to advocate typically cloning and then subtracting out the differences. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Go back out there to that 3D view. That's probably the easiest way to do it. You got your building hanging around out there. If you have that building or some building like that and we want to make it on multiple floors, here's what you do. It sounds weird, but you're actually just going to copy and paste using the clipboard. So as opposed to copying and pasting an image or copying and pasting a Word document, we're going to copy and paste a lot of building objects. And once you choose the whole bunch of building objects, let me show you how I'm selecting the building objects. Let's start with that. I'm just going to drag around them all. That'll get everything, as opposed to control clicking to get them individually. So I got the whole big building in here. When I have the whole big building, I can hit this button right here. This button is the copy of the clipboard. So go ahead and click on that. That will get it up on the clipboard. It may take just a minute to do that. It's got a lot of little objects in there. When you are done with the clipboard, or copying the clipboard, we're going to do a piece. But we're going to do kind of a special piece. It's thinking.
Sorry, where's the place when you post that?
Oh, what it is after you drag and select it all, you should have, we're looking at a whole bunch of things so we can modify this clipboard right here. It's right here. It looks like 2 documents on top of each other. Mine's just taking its sweet time in terms of what it's doing. Let's see what it did. Oh, I think I'm just hovering. Okay, we are now ready to paste, but I don't want you just to paste. Stop for just a second and let's look at the options. Because we have the option to just paste from the clipboard. If you paste from the clipboard, what happens is it'll put it out there, and then you have to kind of navigate it in place. Okay? And we don't want to do that. We want to do something a little bit better. We can copy and put things right exactly on the same place. Sometimes I do that when I'm trying to duplicate an object and kind of make half of it this way and half of it that way. Sometimes, yeah, that sounds weird, but it actually does make sense to do it sometimes. What we're going to suggest doing is that we're going to align to selected levels. And what that's going to do is we'll take this thing on level 1, and we can copy it to levels 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what that looks like is, I'll say align to selected levels. I have some different levels here available to copy it to. Don't copy it back to level 1. You're already on level 1. Okay, copy it to level 2, 3, 3B, 5, however high you want to go. And when you say OK, you'll get instant building. Now, instant building's not quite ready for prime time. It still has a little cleanup action necessary. The first floor probably is a little bit different from the second floor. Second and fourth are probably pretty similar. But you can now start making any changes. Even though it all got cloned as part of the same operation, I can still start making changes. I can say that I only want to take out that window here, and then for this array on this level, see if I can get them. Can't really. What do I want to do here? I just changed the spacing on that level. Oh, that's a little bit weird looking. Oh, I got 2 on top of each other. That's not very good. We can go through on any level, start making changes. For example, on the 3rd level, if I want to put another office in here, start adding walls in there, whatever it is, I can go through and make the changes. But what you're going to find that for a lot of intents and purposes, it really is the same building almost all the way up and down, at least in terms of aligning the outside walls and where the core walls are and stuff like that. So we've created a nice outer shell of a building. Things are looking pretty good. We can still go through and adapt and adjust things, but let's kind of stop and pause there just for a second and kind of talk about the building. So far I got this thing, if I forgot to add something in at one of the different levels. For example, if I needed to, well, I didn't put in some furniture, or in this case, I'm going to go ahead and load in some fixtures. I forgot to put the bathrooms in this thing. Let me go ahead and get some of those toilets. I'll pop them in, and I'll just put them on the wall over here for right now. Not that that's a great location. Okay, but once I have them and I put them on that level, no worry. If I need to get them on the other levels, I can. I can grab them all here. I'll copy them to the clipboard. And then I'll paste and align that down to the other levels too. So I'll take it down, in this case, to 1, 2, 3. I think I'm already on 4. Okay, and copy them down. So don't worry if you didn't get it all copied at first. You can take any sub-component element and keep on copying it up and down. That's okay. No hassle there.
Is there any way to automate that so you can just do one level and building all the levels at the same time?
To make that happen, really, let me actually see if that would work. You're on to sort of a really good question here. If I took this over here, I copy it over there. Building 2. I've actually never tried this. This is sort of an interesting sort of question. If I take that, and I'm wondering about arraying it as opposed to going through and copying it. Let's see what's going on there. Oh, you know what it is? That was the distance to the second one as opposed to the last one. I think we're actually close enough, I think. Take this over here, array, move it to the second one, make 5 of those. Still a little off. What's going on? I think I'm off a little bit in terms of as I was picking the dimensions. But the answer then is yes, that will work that way, because what will happen is, although this is an arrayed object, and I'm looking at level 1 now, I won't be able to edit it until I open the group. But once I do go through and start to make changes on level 1, okay, and I finish that, the weird thing is that'll percolate all the way up through the array. So it's interesting. I never really do that, but that will work in terms of what's going on. There it is back over there in the corner. So you can even think about that as a strategy. In fact, a lot of times I think that is true. If you have some tall tower in level 5 through 10, or a parking garage, and then 11 through 22, or a hotel, and you could sort of, if you want a real quick model building, just do this array of different sort of sub-levels, and real quickly get to a 100-story tower, like in half an hour or something like that, just by arraying something up. So something to think about. I never do that, but why not? That's actually pretty good. Okay, another thing that I want to let you know about relative to these towers, there's a couple different things that typically happen as we start working with bigger towers. Is a lot of times we start moving away from just sort of having these little individual punch windows. We start thinking about having things like curtain walls and just big pieces of glass as they're doing some more interesting things. So that's one thing we need to think about. Another thing we need to think about are shafts, or elevator shafts, stair shafts, things that actually go up and down that are a little bit unique. And I want to fill the holes, something like that. Let me do curtain walls first, and then I'll talk about shafts. We'll talk about both of these more on Friday. Okay, curtain walls, let me kind of give you a real quick primer on curtain walls, just so you sort of have a little bit to operate from. Any wall can be a curtain wall. Let me just go ahead and put a wall out here. That's sort of a plain old wall. I'll stretch that up. And let's make it into a curtain wall. Curtain walls are really just this funny hybrid somewhere between a wall and a window. Okay, and if we want to start creating curtain walls, we have a couple of different standard ways of doing that. In Revit, there's automatically defined 3 different types, and we can create our own types with our own patterns too, but we start just with the default ones. The first one I'll show you is curtain wall. Curtain wall is a big old sheet of glass. Okay, no division to it. It's waiting for you to start adding divisions and grids to it, but it's a big old sheet of glass. There's nothing predefined about it. Okay. There's just no pattern defined to it. If I go through and choose the next one down, which is called exterior glazing, okay, that is a bunch of little glass panels, okay, divided into a pattern, but there's no gridding. There's no, I said there's a grid, there's no mullions. There's no metal elements that are actually helping to brace all that glass right now. The third way you might want to approach a curtain wall is something called storefront. And again, these are just starting points. Storefront is defined as a grid, but it also has the metal elements, the mullions that are helping to support it. So as you think about doing things like a curtain wall, you can customize any of these things. Like everything, it's all just parametrically driven. And we can start changing patterns we want to. For example, here's storefront. It's defined as a certain grid pattern. Let's talk about if that is not the grid pattern you want. I can choose that, and like most things, I can edit the type and take a look at the parameters. And so by default, this is all set up to be 5 feet vertically, vertical grids every 5 feet, horizontal grids every 8 feet, and then we have some mullion pieces, some metallic mullion pieces in there. If you want to change that pattern, I could either sort of change the existing storefront or duplicate it and make it storefront narrow. And when I make that, I can put in a spacing pattern. Oh, maybe make them only 3 feet wide. There we go, and I sort of change the pattern right there. So you can go ahead and take an image or something like this and start changing the pattern. If I want to make those 4 feet, if I want to make those 10 feet tall, whatever it is, I can start changing the pattern around. The funny thing about the pattern is you could even go through and put a bit of an angle on the pattern if you want to. Right now it's angled at 0. If you actually wanted to have something really quickly that's following a very regular pattern but has a little bit of angle to it, let me rotate that 15 degrees. And you can start having more of a triangle, sort of a different pattern. It's still a rectangular pattern, so it's 4-sided pattern, but it's actually sort of having more of a grid to it or something like that. So there's this whole notion that you may want to generate your panels as just pattern-based panels. The nice thing about that is they're very automatic. If you go through and you create a big old panel like this using a pattern, the good news is it doesn't really matter. If I go through and I start extending that out, let's let it regenerate. If I stretch it up, whatever I do, that pattern's going to auto-generate. Okay, and that's actually kind of nice. It's good to have things that auto-generate for ourselves. Okay. Another good thing about patterns like this is if you have an unusual shape. For example, I'll do a wall. And let me go ahead and have, some arcing shape. I'll give that the pattern. It'll do a good job of following all that. So if you can use a pattern-based one, in general, your life will be easier. And if you look at a lot of the curtain walls out there, they are relatively simple patterns. If, on the other hand, you really have a custom need and you really want a very custom sort of curtain wall, you can do that too. And how you do that is, let me get rid of that one so it's out of the picture. I go through and I take a wall and I go through and put in just curtain wall, the big old piece of glass. And then on curtain wall, I can basically impose a curtain grid. So curtain grid's, again, one of the mainline tools right up top of the home ribbon. I can say curtain grid. And what curtain grid does is if I hover over the drawing or the wall, it'll highlight the interesting areas, the quarter points, the third points, the half points, but I can start subdividing this thing up. And I might want to do that because I have some sort of custom grid pattern in mind. Kind of more like a plaid. Whatever you have in mind, you can make your own custom grid. This is, again, going to be one of these things I want you to always think about. Is it easier to take a standard grid and take out lines, or is it easier to take a blank piece of paper and add all the lines? Because it goes either way. You get to the same point, whichever way you want to. I can take this one and subtract, I can take this one and keep on adding. And as I add, that's just going to go ahead and put in the grid lines. If I want to put the mullions in, the actual metallic pieces, I can either do a single line segment and just add the mullion there, or I can actually say just put it on all the grid lines and just real quickly get the metallic elements that are sort of doing that. And we're going to learn when we come on back on Friday that we could actually go through and be very custom about this. A lot of the newer buildings on campus you see actually have very elaborate systems where we have light shelves and fins and all sorts of things that are all about controlling sunlight and bouncing the light into the building. And we do have some mullions too. So you get a lot of power out of that stuff. Now, the only thing about curtain grids I really want, or curtain walls I want to really warn you about, that's sort of a hidden surprise or hidden gotcha, is this. If I go through and I try to create a big old curved curtain wall, that happens. You're going, that's not right. Okay. It seems to understand that it wants to be curved, but it seems like it doesn't know how to be it just yet. And that's actually sort of what's going on. Unless you have all the money of Steve Jobs, you don't have the ability to create large pieces of curved glass. It is possible, but it's a very expensive thing to do and hard to work with and all those things. So Revit by default tries to make you take a big old curved piece and break it into a number of straight line segments, which are a whole lot easier to operate with. But if you do have the ability, actually, no, I take that back. Yeah, we could model it that way, but what I'm going to do is show you what we typically do within Revit, which is to take that big old curve and subdivide it. And here's how it looks. If you have that curve and you want to start breaking it, we get the curtain grid tool out. And we can basically start indicating on the grid, or on the curve, where we'd like it to break. So if you want that curve and you're only going to give me 2 pieces of glass, that's what you're going to get. If you give me 4 pieces of glass, I can give you that. If you give me 8 pieces, I can give you that. If you keep on breaking it finer and finer, you'll get something like that. And you'll start to see that after a while, this is the same as that. Okay, so just watch out for that. So you're trying to create curved glass, it will do it. You just have to remember to go through and break it like this. Okay, so if you do that, you'll keep yourself out of trouble. Okay, final little thing in terms of these curtain walls that I want you to think about. I have my old building over there. It was looking pretty good. It's looking kind of boring now with all that nice curtain wall sitting next to it. I might want to go ahead and incorporate some of the curtain wall into my building here. But I've already gone through it. I've modeled this big brick building going up 4 stories. So what am I going to do? I don't want to undo and kind of like do it all over again. That would seem like a big old waste of time. So let's talk about what you can do. Any of these different walls, for example, this whole end wall, if you wanted to, could be made into a curtain wall. So I could make an entire wall into a curtain wall just by doing that. That may not be the nicest thing to do. Let me go ahead and Control Z that back out. If I would like to go ahead and just make a portion of the wall, maybe I want to put a nice curtain wall kind of here at the corner or something like that. What you might want to do is something like this. As opposed to taking the entire wall, making it a curtain wall, you can use a fantastic tool I love to work with called the split tool. The split tool is right over here, and it looks like a little X-Acto knife. You can basically cut a long element into sub-pieces so you can change parts of them. So how that works is, let me grab my little split tool. I can say on this wall, I want to go through, maybe I'll split the wall just this side of the hallway. Okay, can you see a little seam in there now? Maybe I'll put it on this side too. I'll put a seam over here. So basically now I can take just that corner and I can replace it with storefront. Okay, so not too bad in the scheme of things. So now I got a little blasting corner there. You're thinking, that's kind of looking interesting. Okay, that might be kind of fun. If I can put that on one floor, can I actually get that to go all the way up and down the rest of the building? And there's a couple ways we might approach that. If I want to go through and replace the other parts of the building, I could come down to this floor and cut it. I could turn down this floor and cut it and do all that. But honestly, I'm probably going to mess something up and not get the lines to line up just perfectly. So what I would recommend doing that I think is actually a better strategy is this. Don't be afraid to back up a little bit to go forward. Where by that I mean, don't be afraid to go ahead and just take out these end walls and then grab these 2 walls, which now have the new shape you want, and then copy and paste them down to the lower levels too. So sometimes you do have to kind of back up a little bit to get up to what you want. Yeah, you can do that on the same side over there. So don't be afraid to kind of think about how you want to do that. Sometimes it really does involve just backing off and coming back at it again from the other side. So you can go ahead and do things like that. And as you think about your bigger buildings, yeah, just think about there are punched openings, there are curtain walls. You would sometimes want to mix them all together. Okay, let me stop right there for just sort of take questions about curtain walls, because that's something I want you to start playing around with a little bit. As you start working on the next assignment, you'll probably be using some curtain walls. Let me tell you what the next assignment is, just so you sort of put that in your mind in the last few minutes here. For your next assignment, as opposed to working on your little wood frame structure, you're going to work on a much bigger structure. You're going to work on basically what is now the Gibson lab that's being built next door, but you're going to work on the companion building to Y2E2. Okay, so we're going to give you a model that looks an awful lot like Y2E2. It has some walls, it has curtain walls, punched windows, the same kind of sloping roofing columns, a lot of the elements. It's not quite Y2E2, but it's a pretty good simplification of it. And what you're going to do is basically design a building that's going to go across the courtyard from it. That's going to complement it. And as part of that, you get to go ahead and exercise a little design flexibility as opposed to just having a complete mirror image. I want you to think a little bit out sort of, you can sort of modernize it a little bit and give it a little more of a cutting edge, how you might start changing that building, but you're going to start coming up with a design concept and illustrating it in a good model. Okay? So what's going to happen with that assignment is we'll go ahead and give that to you on Friday. And you're going to have, I think it's like the first 2, maybe even 3 weeks of the quarter to kind of work on that, just kind of between everything else you're doing. But what we're going to do is go ahead and have you work on those things, and we're going to have a big old review of your projects, actually back up at the Artist Gallery, so up in San Francisco. Invite all sorts of folks from the industry to come take a look at that, and give you a chance to kind of show off some of your new skills. And so, that's what's coming up. So don't worry about that yet. Just get today's assignment finished up, and then we'll kind of get that thing all set up for you too. Okay? So just be thinking ahead, and as you're kind of, oh, tomorrow as you're wandering around doing your advising things and it's kind of hunting around the building, pay attention to this building and think about what's like, what you don't like so much about it, how people are using it. But try to understand the building and think about if you were going to try and do something that was a little bit better. And I'll have some suggestions about what could be better. Like one thing that I don't like about this building is I always sort of feel in this building like we're in all these little cells that are very isolated from each other. Like the fact that we only have these hard walls and we can't see out and no one can see out sort of bothers me. I want sort of more collaborative spaces. That's just sort of me. I want you to be thinking about, as you work in the building in the next several days, just really how you'd improve this building and change it. Now, like, have you noticed there really aren't very many good spaces for students to work in the building?
Yes.
Yes, you probably figured that out. You know, there's a lot of things about the building that can be improved. So one of your design tasks is to be thinking about really how we can improve on what's here, make it a more collaborative environment, support you guys better, and then illustrate it. Maybe put a computer room in that is deeper than whatever it is here and has actual ventilation or light to it or something like that. There's a lot of things we could do that would be sort of an improvement on this. So think ahead of those things. But, okay, let's go ahead and probably just wrap there for today. In terms of, I just want to get you starting to think about multi-story buildings and the basic mechanism we're going to do it. It's going to be this kind of copy and paste sort of thing. That'll get you going. Then we're going to start rolling it around. Yeah.
So for the assignment that's due tomorrow morning, we never learned how to do the schedule for the rooms.
Oh, let's go ahead and show you that. I'm sorry. You are absolutely correct. We ran out of time at a funny spot. Let me show you what that is. Okay. Did we show you? I get all confused. Did we see different things? Did we show you how to put rooms into the space? Okay, let's start with that. Let's go to the first floor plan and show you. This one already has some rooms in it. Let me take the rooms out and kind of like show you how you create them again. Take that out. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I think we're there. Okay, here we have our space. We need to put some rooms in here. Here's how you put rooms in. Rooms are actually kind of an interesting object type. They're sort of they're an abstract object. You know, almost everything else we do is a BIM model, is something you can pick up and touch, and load out the truck and order somewhere. Rooms are actually sort of a little bit abstract, but you sort of place them in a very similar way. Where on the Home tab, you'll actually find there is the Room and Area tools. The room creator is right at the top. We go ahead and sort of choose the room tool. When you choose rooms, or try to create rooms, here's what happens. If you hover over an area, what's going to happen is Revit will try to figure out, based on its notion of a room, which is an enclosing, bounding wall, okay, where a room might be. So it's going to think of that as a room right now because it's got 4 walls. It understands there's a door in the wall. That's okay. It still thinks of that as being a room. Okay, it is on the Architecture tab or the Home tab. It's in Room and Area. It's right at the top. So you can choose Room, and I'll put it right there. Let's talk about this room. This whole area, all out here, is actually considered to be a big old room. 361 square feet, a big old room. And the reason is, there's like no wall here. There's no separation there. It kind of spills on over. It creates a room in that area too. I can create a room there, and that's going to be fine. If you want to think of that as room, that is cool. Very often, though, if we have a big old space like that, a big open space, we do like to think about things being a little bit different. I kind of actually think of this as being more the workroom, and this being more the entry or the hallway or something like that. And if you want to sort of separate those things, right into the room tool, you'll find something called a room separator. And let's show you how it looks. There's a room separator line. Let me go back over here. It's this room separator. And how that works is you basically just draw a line which acts as a virtual wall. Okay, so you might notice that when I did that, the square footage dropped. I actually need to create a room on this side now. So it's just a virtual room. Okay, but especially in big open plan offices, you need those because you need to kind of have a way to separate those as opposed to saying the entire floor plate. Now, as I'm placing the rooms, you'll see a couple different things happen. There are all these little tags that show up in the rooms. The room includes a room number, there's a room label, and the size. And if you want to go through and just sort of enter information about the rooms, you can just go ahead and type it right in here. That's going to be the storeroom. Oops, not that. I'm opening up the tag to edit, and I don't want to do that. I really just want to make that the bathroom. I'll choose this one, and I'll call that just the entry. And I'll call this one over here the workroom. Now, because I created those 4 different rooms, we actually have 4 different room objects, and we can schedule those. And I think in your template there already is a room schedule, but if there isn't, we can show you how to create one. The room schedule shows up. Let me just kind of show it to you right down here. Let me take out some of these. I deleted some things, so there's some confusing information that'll sort of bother you there. I have created 4 different rooms: storeroom, bathroom, workroom, and entry. They have numbers. I can renumber those if I want them. For example, I can make that 1, 2, 3, 4. They just have to be unique. Okay. In terms of the schedule, there's all these different fields. I can sort of put any of the fields in here I want. Oh, actually, I know what's happening. That's the room schedule that I created. Let me go back to the room finish schedule, which I think is what you have in your sheet right now. Okay, so there's a couple things we may want to do right now. This is what comes up by default, the room finish schedule, room main area. Okay. One thing we may want to do is, I know you're trying to get to 500 square feet. It'd be nice to go through and actually just have this tally up and add up for you automatically, because the computer's really good about adding up areas. You shouldn't have to do that too. How you do that, if you have a schedule and you want to actually put a subtotal in there, it looks like this. We'll take the schedule, we'll basically go to, it's the whole issue of, well, it could be sorting and grouping, but really all we need to do is basically choose area as the thing was. Actually, we need to put the subtotal line in. I take that back. We do need that. So what I'm going to do is go to sorting and grouping and say, hey, in this schedule, I'd actually like to put not just a subtotal line, but a grand total line. That'll give me the bottom line. Choose that, say OK. Actually, I won't say OK. I'm going to flip over to formatting and say, OK, one last thing. There's always one more thing. You have to tell it which of the different fields it is that you want to tally up. An area is the one that I want to calculate. You can put subtotals on anything that could be calculated. Calculate the totals, say OK, and then you get the 489 square feet. So that's how you create that. Basically, put the rooms in, then create a schedule of the rooms, and put a subtotal on. Other things just came up with a question. I think it's a really good question. You want so badly, and I wish there was a way to do it, to actually just be able to pick up the floor material and the wall material and the ceiling material right from the model. You really want to be able to do that, but there is no actual way to do that right now. Rooms and floors are really kind of 2 separate objects, so you can't grab the information automatically. So at this point, when I say go ahead and put in the area or put in the material, it really is just this notion that, okay, in the bathroom, I'm going to put tile in there. In the workroom, that's going to be carpet, whatever it is. Storeroom, that could just be concrete, plain old concrete in there. Entry, that might be carpet there. All we're really doing is putting in text values there. Now, an important thing to note about the text values you're putting in here, everything we're putting in here actually does show up elsewhere. So if you look in the property browser, all the same fields are there. So it's here, it can show up in the schedule, the schedule will show up here, and you can really put it in whichever place makes the most sense to you. Okay. I often put things just in the schedule because it's really easy to type them into the table. It's just like you use one at a time. Okay. That's all we're really asking for relative to the room schedule. Go ahead and just put some rooms in, add them all up. Now, an important thing, Sharp-eyed people who've had to deal with planning before realize that that's not actually 500 square feet of building. There's actually more building there than that, because we're not actually counting the area inside the walls, we're just counting the interior area. And it's a little bit of cheat in the scheme of things. There is a way we can do that. If we need to go ahead and actually do the true calculations, which planning would make me do, but you're not going to make me do. I'm not going to make you do. There's an area tool where you can choose boundaries. And actually, if you do real estate calculations, especially, there's incredibly funny rules about a wall that's between my office and your office, or a wall that's between here and a hallway, or a wall that's between here and the outside, about whether or not you count the area inside the wall against my rent, or against your rent, or against the building's common space. Like an incredible series of standards. This has all been negotiated out. We really want you to honor these things. But what you're doing right now is just keep it pretty simple. As long as you're around 500 square feet, you're good. And again, if you're at 480 square feet, super. If you're at 502 square feet, no problem. Okay? 580, pushing it. 750, you might want to slim down a little. 2,000, okay, you overshot. So, but yeah, I'll live with your 2,000 square feet. We'll say, hey, try harder next time in terms of controlling yourself as you're designing. I don't want you to basically stay up all night and redesign, try and take it down to 499.5. Okay, give yourself a little squish, but use that 500 as a guideline just to make sure you get about the right size. Okay. Speedy. Okay, why don't we break for today? Why don't you guys take off, have fun with your advising and all that stuff tomorrow. And then in terms of getting this all turned in, really, since most people won't be around tomorrow, you'll be doing other things, bring it in on Friday morning. If you can't put it up on the server because the server's fighting with you, put it on a thumb drive, and we'll copy it onto the server like on Friday morning. Like oh, where do you want to put it? I think it's the thing, it says like submit your assignments here or something like that. Where did it go? It is, put it inside, submit your projects here. So go ahead and create a folder for yourself and drop it in there.